Of the ACDP Reverend Kenneth Meshwe, both members of the Portfolio Committee. Once again, welcome and thank you for joining us. Let's talk about the Police Service Amendment Bill. Now, this bill is an attempt to comply with the Constitutional Court ruling that the Directorate for Priority Crime Investigations, that is the Hawks, was not sufficiently independent from political interference. Opposition parties and some civil organizations says the amendments on the table are not going far enough to ensure an absence of political interference, as required by a number of international anti-corruption protocols to which South Africa is a signatory. Well, to start off with you, Ms. Diane Kohler-Barnett, does the bill go far enough, and if not so, why not so?
I don't believe it does. The committee waited for a year or so before it came before us. We're having to rush it through Parliament. We were given no other options. There were no other options considered. Should we put this under the NPA? Should we perhaps set it up as a more independent unit, such as the Independent Complaints Directorate, which has now become the IPID? There were other options to consider. We were never given that opportunity. So what we're doing today is being determined by officials. They determine this is what should happen. We need to tweak the SAPS bill and basically try and convince the judges that it's independent. But the head of the unit is appointed by a single politician. That is not independent. Parliament's not brought into it. It, yes, goes to Cabinet to be rubber stamped, but that's the reality of the situation. There are many, many other areas where I believe the fact that it falls underneath the National Police Commissioner, the head of the unit is subordinate to that person rank-wise. You know, we just haven't given it due consideration, and I fear that the Constitutional Court may well send this back to the Portfolio Committee for a third time, and that would be absolutely outrageous. There were 12 substantial presentations by professors of law, top lawyers around the country, all of whom said that they did not believe that this was going to satisfy the Constitutional Court judgment.
Reverend Meshwe, is the bill not going far enough?
Well, we are not there yet. It is going where it's supposed to go. We have not concluded with the bill yet. Maybe I need to mention what the ACP would have preferred, but I have not concluded that this is not going to be, because the Constitutional Court did not give a ruling on where it should be placed. Our preference as the ACDP was that it should be placed in Justice and Constitutional Department. Why? Because it would be prosecution driven, as the Scorpions were. The Scorpions were more prosecution driven than what it is now. That's going to be investigation driven. Now, the advantage we have seen with the model that the Scorpions had was that because the prosecutors and the investigators were working together from the beginning, they had a greater success in prosecutions. But now, if it is going to be just investigation driven, you are going to have the investigators conclude what they're doing and then hand over to the prosecutors. And when the prosecutors would find that there's something still missing that needs to be done, then it would take more time to send it back to the investigators, when it would have been better from the beginning for the investigators and the prosecutors to work together, as was happening with the Scorpions. That was our preference, and is still our preference. But as I say, we are not there yet. We are still going to try and argue our case so that the placement of the Hawks is given to the Justice Department.
Annelies, could the bill be rejected by the Constitutional Court?
I think we have done enough that it will stand the test of time for the Constitutional Court. The bill as was introduced is not the same bill before the committee anymore. The committee has made substantial changes to that bill, so much so that it's now a committee bill. It's no longer considered to be a departmental bill. I must also just say that it's not true that that they didn't consider other options. There were quite a number of options that the team that drafted the bill considered, and they were in negotiations with the Department of Public Service and Administration. There were numerous role players that played a role in that. I think it's also important to realize that the Constitutional Court highlights a couple of issues that it believes should address. It says adequate independence. It talks about the security of tenure of the staff and the appointment of the head, the ministerial committee, and I believe that every single one of those and more has been addressed by the committee. Every single one. I just want to add one last thing before I give back to you. The fact of the matter is the Hawks, as they operate now, also have a prosecution team that are working with them. There's a dedicated, and it was explained by General Dramat as well, a dedicated team from justice, prosecutors that work with them.
But Annalise, total independence from political interference, is that achievable when the head of the unit will be appointed by one single politician?
It's not true that it's one single politician that appoints the head of the unit. Obviously, there's a process that will have to be embarked on before that person will be appointed. And I think we must wait for the minister to announce to us how he foresees that process to go forward. It's ordinary, it's common government practice that your ministers appoint people. So eventually this person would have been appointed by a minister. Whether it's the Minister of Justice or the Minister of Police is basically irrelevant. And after a certain level, these people are also the position needs to be agreed to by cabinet, and this person is going to be on this level. We have now given this head of this unit so much power. It will be the head of the unit that will determine what cases will be investigated. It will be the head of the unit who will appoint his own staff, who will be responsible for discipline in that unit, who will staff can only be transferred from that unit once the head of the unit agreed to it. We've ring-fenced the budget. Nobody can touch the budget of the Hawks. Once it's ring-fenced, it can only be used for that unit. If they don't use it, they lose it. It goes back to Treasury.
Let me bring Ms. Scholar Barnard back here. In your own view, where should the Hawks be?
It should absolutely be under justice. It should be independent. It should have the head appointed and run through by Parliament, not by a single person, and not signed off by the Cabinet. So it's going to look like another ANC appointment to another head of a unit. It's going to fall under the National Police Commissioner. And I don't think that the Constitutional Court, they don't have to impress the Democratic Alliance. They have to convince the judges at the Constitutional Court. That's not going to happen.
Reverend Meshwe?
Well, as I said, our preference was that it should fall under Justice Department because the Scorpions did a sterling job. And one of the fights that we had before the Scorpions were disbanded was an attempt to move the Scorpions from justice to the police department. And because many people were upset by that, many people didn't agree with that, and we also didn't agree with that. So we believe the best place for the Hawks to be placed is in the Justice Department.
Annalise, what is the international practice with regard to anti-corruption units? Where should it be?
That's quite interesting. South Africa, as many other countries, are a signatory to the United Nations anti-corruption the anti-corruption, And the fact of the matter is, if you look at the international best practice, it is actually one of the things the UN also warns against, is that they say don't create a new unit, because it gets backed down by administration. Most of the countries that are signatories to this are actually, their corruption fighting units are based within their police services. The UK is an example of it. It's based within their police service because of the support that it gets also from being in the police, in general investigation, in assisting with forensic laboratories, in assisting with your criminal record center, etc. So most of them are based inside the police services.
In conclusion, with cases like the Richard Mdluli saga, are we getting value for our tax money, and should we trust the police service?
We're not getting value for money. I think the Treasury has shown us that. Most certainly there's been an enormous wastage. Look at those ridiculous police days. They're under investigation, no tenders called. There's a lot going on in the SAPS that perhaps doesn't get out there. So I don't think we're getting value for money, and I think it's a huge concern. The trouble is that you have thousands and thousands of really honourable, honest, hard-working SAPS members, and they are being tainted by the sorts of filth we're seeing in the headlines today.
Briefly, your view, Reverend.
We should honour thousands of policemen and women in blue who are doing a sterling job. But to encourage them, let's ensure that those that lead them, those that are at the top, are people of integrity, people who are abiding by the rules. Now, one thing that is a great concern to me is that the rules of suspension are not very, very clear in our country, particularly when it comes to the SAPS. You look at the man who's the real national commissioner. He's under suspension. Why? Because he's being investigated. Now you come to the Mdluli saga. He is also investigated, but not under suspension. So you ask the question, why treat the two men differently? Because if both of them are investigated, why are they not both suspended? No, only one is suspended. Can I ask a question? Is it because one is a present blue-eyed boy, if I may use that term, or what's the reason that he's not suspended? I'm not sure. But the ACDP says, let all rules apply equally to all people that are in the top, regardless of your connections.
Annalise, are we getting value for our tax money? And what's your response to cause that Lieutenant General Mdluli should be completely removed from the police service?
I think we must wait, as I said before, we must wait for due process to take place. You know, a year ago it was said that General Tele is the blue-eyed boy of the president. Today we told it's General Mdluli. I mean, really. I think we are getting value for our money. But I believe there's always room for improvement. We have highlighted the fact that we believe that we can do better in terms of the detectives, and that we want to see better conviction rates from them. We have indicated that we want to see a better trained police officer in the field. So there's always room for improvement. The service of the police will never be adequate to everybody's need, but we must strive to get there as close as possible.
Honourable members, we've run out of time. Thank you very much for coming through. We appreciate your time. We now focus on the debate on the sports and recreation budget vote after the break. Stay with us.